Hello, dear friend. Thank you for joining us at Books and More, a quiet corner where we gather to seek wisdom and growth. Here, we carefully develop the original essence of great books, offering you the core values of life while respecting your precious time. In a world that often feels loud and chaotic, have you ever longed for a story of quiet persistence and unwavering principle? Today, we invite you to walk beside us as we explore the remarkable journey of a true icon in the pages of Buffett, The Making of an American Capitalist. This is much more than a biography of wealth. It is a profound look at the shaping of a mind and the steady building of a legend. How does a young boy from Omaha, counting bottle caps and license plates, grow to redefine the very architecture of global finance? Is it truly possible to reach the summit of world success while keeping a humble heart and a strictly ethical soul? And what does it really take to stand firm in your beliefs when everyone around you is swept away by the tide of the moment? You know, dear friend, we are all investors in our own lives, deciding every day where to place our time, our energy, and our love. I hope that as we uncover this journey, you feel a sense of calm and clarity, finding the courage to stay true to your own path, no matter how different it may seem to others. I wish you a peaceful listening experience, full of light and new perspectives. Now, let us begin this inspiring journey together. Introduction to the Sage of Omaha. In the history of the stock market, Warren Buffett stands as a truly singular figure. I have observed that while most investors chase short-term gains or get swept up in the latest market fads, Buffett has spent 4 decades proving that a different path is possible. He started with virtually nothing, and simply by choosing the right stocks, he accumulated one of the most massive fortunes of the 20th century. His record is staggering, achieving consistent profits that experts and academics long thought were impossible to sustain without a heavy dose of luck. Yet with Buffett, luck is often just an excuse used by those who fail to see the discipline behind his success. Whether the market was booming or in a state of crisis, he managed to generate enormous returns with a stability that defied conventional wisdom. His achievement is the product of a classic long-term approach to investing. He has stayed away from the unethical schemes and frantic money shuffling that often define Wall Street. Instead, he returned to the core truths of pure capitalism. The numbers speak for themselves. If an individual had invested $10,000 with him in 1956 and followed his lead, that investment would have grown to over $125 million by the mid-90s. But Buffett is more than just a collection of impressive statistics. His influence on American culture is profound. Every year, thousands of investors make a pilgrimage to Omaha, treating his annual meetings like a sacred rite and his words like scripture. He has a rare gift for taking the most intimidating financial jargon and making them feel as simple as a conversation about the weather. He never forgets that behind every ticker symbol is a real, tangible business. His excellence is rooted in qualities that are often rare in the financial world: patience, principle, and a fierce rationality. He avoids the traps of financial leverage and complex derivatives, choosing instead to bet on the long-term growth of businesses he understands. In many ways, he represents the mythic American hero from the Midwest, standing firm against the corruption and complexity of the East. However, he is a man, not a myth. He has his flaws, including an emotional detachment and a single-minded focus on work that can make him seem distant even to those closest to him. He shuns the typical trappings of wealth, preferring his longtime home in Omaha and a simple hamburger. It is within this quiet life and his focused refuge that he discovered the secrets to the market and painted a unique portrait of what it means to be a true capitalist. The Seeds of a Capitalist Omaha to Columbia. Almost from the moment he entered the world in Omaha, Warren Buffett possessed a passion for numbers that bordered on the absolute. As a boy, I found him sitting on porches with friends, not just playing, but recording license plates of passing cars and counting the frequency of words in the local newspaper. To Warren, the world was a puzzle that could be solved through arithmetic. He had an uncanny ability to memorize city populations and baseball statistics, turning every quiet Sunday in church into a mental exercise where he calculated the lifespans of hymn composers. It was as if he were constantly playing a private, internal game of counting an imaginary wealth that he was certain would one day be real. This fascination with numbers quickly evolved into an obsession with money. I recall the story of his first wallet, a coin changer given to him by his Aunt Alice, which he wore proudly at his waist. At age 5, he was already an entrepreneur, selling sticks of gum to neighbors and eventually moving on to lemonade stands. But even then, he was more than a salesman. He was a researcher. He would spend hours counting the bottle caps from soda machines to determine which brand had the highest market share. These early years in Omaha were the laboratory where he first tested the principles of supply and demand, learning that profit was not just a matter of luck, but of careful observation. The most profound influence on his young life was his father, Howard Buffett. Howard was a stockbroker and a man of unshakable, almost rigid integrity. He introduced Warren to the world of the ticker tape and the stock exchange, planting the seeds of a career that would span decades. Yet Warren's home life was complicated. While he idolized his father's principles, he had to navigate the emotional volatility of his mother, Layla. Her unpredictable outbursts forced Warren to retreat into a fortress of logic and self-reliance. He developed a deep-seated fear of death and a desire for control that manifested in his vow to become a millionaire by age 35. Money, for Warren, was more than a means to buy things. It was a way to keep score and a shield against the uncertainties of life. When Howard was elected to Congress and the family moved to Washington, D.C., Warren felt like an exile. He hated the city and its social pretensions, but he used that alienation as fuel. He turned his paper routes for the Washington Post into a sophisticated business, out-earning many adults and even using his savings to buy a 40-acre farm in Nebraska at age 14. He was a boy with a man's portfolio. His brief stint running away to Hershey, Pennsylvania, was a rare moment of rebellion, but even then, his mind was on the economics of the golf course where he planned to work. He was already a capitalist in a schoolboy's uniform, more interested in his tax returns than his homework. The intellectual climax of his youth came when he arrived at Columbia University to study under Benjamin Graham. Before Graham, the stock market was viewed by many as a high-stakes gambling den, but Warren found in Graham a man who treated investing as a rigorous science. Graham taught him the concept of intrinsic value and the necessity of a margin of safety. He introduced Warren to the allegory of Mr. Market, the manic depressive partner who offers to buy or sell stocks at different prices every day and whom the wise investor ignores unless the price is right. Warren was Graham's star pupil, the only student ever to receive an A+ in his class. He didn't just learn the material, he absorbed it into his very soul. He realized that a share of stock was not just a ticker symbol, but a fractional ownership in a real business. When he discovered Geico, he didn't just look at its charts. He took a train to Washington and knocked on the door until someone explained the insurance business to him. By the time he left Columbia, Warren Buffett was no longer just a boy who was good with numbers. He had become a disciplined thinker with a clear-eyed vision of the world, ready to apply Graham's cold logic to the pursuit of a fortune that would eventually stagger the imagination. He returned to Omaha not as a speculator, but as a practitioner of value, carrying with him the blueprint for a life built on the bedrock of rationality. The path to control and the Berkshire mistake. When Warren Buffett returned to Omaha in 1956, he carried with him more than just the principles of Benjamin Graham. He brought an ironclad confidence that he could manage money better than anyone on Wall Street. He was only 26, yet he already possessed a net worth of $140,000. Most young men of his age would have sought a prestigious job at a major firm, but Warren chose the path of total independence. He gathered 7 limited partners, mostly family and friends, and formed Buffett Associates Limited. The rules he laid down were unheard of at the time. He would tell them nothing about what he was buying or selling. He would send out a single report once a year, and he would only be paid if he outperformed the market. It was a partnership built on total trust and total control. I have always found it remarkable that a man so young could command such absolute authority over his elders. In those early years, Warren was a tireless hunter of what he called cigar butts. These were mediocre companies selling at such low prices that they had one good puff of profit left in them. He spent his days in a small study at home, buried in the thick pages of Moody's manuals, looking for the tiny statistical discrepancies that meant a stock was undervalued. He wasn't just a passive investor for long. He began to seek control. The Sanborn Map Company was his first major laboratory for this strategy. He realized that the company's investment portfolio was worth far more than its map-making business. By quietly accumulating shares and eventually confronting the board, he forced a liquidation that unlocked immense value for his partners. This was the moment Warren moved from being a simple picker of stocks to a shaper of corporations. Then came Berkshire Hathaway. It is one of the great ironies of financial history that the cornerstone of his empire was originally a mistake born of a rare moment of peak. Berkshire was a struggling textile firm in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Warren had been buying its stock because it was cheap relative to its working capital. In 1964, the company's head, Seabury Stanton, offered to buy back Warren's shares at a specific price, but when the formal offer arrived, it was an eighth of a point lower than what they had orally agreed upon. Warren was furious at the deception. Instead of selling, he decided to buy the whole company, fire Stanton, and take charge. He soon realized that the textile industry was a losing game, a treadmill where every dollar reinvested was swallowed by competition from the South and overseas. However, Berkshire provided something more valuable than fabric. It became a source of capital. In 1967, Warren used Berkshire's cash to buy National Indemnity, a small insurance company in Omaha. This was the discovery of a lifetime. Insurance gave him access to float. The premium is paid by customers that the company holds until claims are eventually settled. To Warren, float was like an interest-free loan that he could use to invest in the market. It was the engine that would eventually transform a dying textile mill into a massive investment vehicle. As the 1960s roared toward a close, Wall Street entered a period of frantic speculation. It was the era of the go-go funds and the conglomerate builders. Warren felt increasingly alienated from this environment. He saw people making fortunes in stocks that had no intrinsic value, and he refused to join the madness. He told his partners that he was out of step with the market and that his edge was disappearing. In 1969, at the very height of the bull market, he did the unthinkable. He closed the partnership. He returned the capital to his investors and walked away. He kept his own fortune largely in Berkshire Hathaway and diversified retailing. He had reached the summit of his first career and decided to quit while he was ahead, leaving the chaos of Wall Street behind to focus on building something permanent from the quiet of Omaha. It was a transition that marked his evolution from a professional investor into a permanent owner of businesses. Strategic alliances and the power of the press. By the early 1970s, Warren Buffett had reached a crossroads. He was 40 years old, a multi-millionaire, and for the first time in his adult life, he was without the structured demands of a private investment partnership. I watched as he settled into a new role in Omaha, acting as a civic leader and a director of local banks. Yet, his mind remained restlessly focused on the quest for the perfect business. This was the period when his relationship with Charlie Munger moved from casual friendship to a profound intellectual alliance that would change the course of his career. Charlie was the one man who could challenge Warren's thinking. While Warren had been a devoted disciple of Benjamin Graham's cigar butt style of investing, Charlie pushed him to see the greater value in paying a fair price for a truly great company. He argued that it was better to own a dominant, high-quality business with an enduring brand than a collection of mediocre ones that happened to be cheap. Their collaboration began to take shape through Blue Chip Stamps, a company that provided them with a new pool of investment capital and a laboratory for their evolving philosophy. This shift in mindset led Warren back to the city of his youth, Washington, D.C. But this time, he returned not as a delivery boy, but as a major shareholder of the Washington Post. I saw how he carefully navigated his entry into the world of Katharine Graham, the formidable but often insecure publisher of the Post. Warren recognized that the newspaper was a classic toll bridge business. In a town like Washington, everyone had to cross that bridge to get the news, and advertisers had to pay the toll. He became a mentor to Kay Graham, guiding her through the complexities of corporate finance and teaching her how to value her own company. He stood by her during the bitter pressmen's strike, providing the steady, rational support she needed to modernize the paper's operations. For Warren, the Post was the ultimate investment, a business with an unassailable economic moat and a management team he could trust. The profit he eventually realized was immense, but the relationship he built with the Grahams was equally significant, as it integrated him into the highest circles of American power. While the Post was a victory of influence and advisory, Warren's acquisition of the Buffalo Evening News in 1977 was a test of his raw competitive will. He wanted his own toll bridge, a dominant newspaper in a major city that he could own outright. The purchase was a massive bet on a struggling industrial city, and it nearly led to disaster. I observed the intense legal and financial pressure Warren faced when he launched a Sunday edition, sparking a predatory pricing lawsuit from the rival Courier Express. For several years, the Buffalo News lost millions of dollars, and many on Wall Street thought Warren had finally made a fatal mistake. He was accused of being a monopolist and a ruthless outsider. Yet his belief in the inherent economics of a one-newspaper town was unshakable. He brought in Stan Lipsey from Omaha to overhaul the paper's culture and remained patient while the competition bled out. When the Courier Express finally folded, the Buffalo News became one of the most profitable enterprises in the Berkshire portfolio, proving that Warren's long-term vision and willingness to endure short-term pain were his greatest weapons. These years were the forge in which the modern Berkshire Hathaway was shaped. Warren was no longer just a passive stock picker. He was a corporate strategist who understood the psychological and competitive dynamics of entire industries. He learned that the best businesses were those that could raise prices without losing customers, and those that required very little capital to grow. Whether it was through the influence of Charlie Munger or the practical lessons learned in the newsrooms of Washington and Buffalo, Warren had moved beyond the simple arithmetic of the past. He was now an architect of value, building a fortress of high-quality businesses that would provide the cash flow for everything that was yet to come. He had found his voice and his stage, and the quiet man from Omaha was beginning to cast a very long shadow over the world of American capitalism. Life turns and the heights of the 80s. As the 1970s drew to a close, I watched as the private world Warren Buffett had so carefully constructed began to unravel in ways that no financial spreadsheet could predict. For over 20 years, his wife Susie had been his emotional anchor, the person who softened his sharp edges and allowed him to retreat into his fortress of numbers. But Susie had her own dreams, and in 1977, she made the agonizing decision to move to San Francisco to pursue a career in singing. I saw a man who was utterly devastated. Warren was a creature of habit who could barely function in a kitchen, let alone a life without the woman he idolized. Yet, in a testament to the unusual and deep bond they shared, Susie did not truly leave him. She remained his closest confidant and eventually introduced him to Astrid Manx, a waitress from the French cafe, who began to care for him in Omaha. This unconventional arrangement provided Warren with the domestic stability he required to keep his mind focused on the markets, even as the distance between him and Susie remained a permanent, quiet ache in his life. Business, however, remained his ultimate refuge. In 1983, Warren walked across the street from his favorite steakhouse to visit the Nebraska Furniture Mart. There, he met Rose Blumkin, the legendary Mrs. B, a woman who at age 89 still navigated her massive store in a golf cart, outworking everyone in sight. I recalled the simplicity of that transaction, which became a hallmark of his career. There were no teams of lawyers or months of due diligence. Warren asked her if she wanted to sell. She named a price of $60 million, and they settled it with a handshake and a one-page contract. To Warren, Mrs. B was the ideal manager, a fanatic who understood that the only way to win was to have the lowest costs and the most loyal customers. He saw in her store another version of his beloved toll bridge, a business so dominant that competitors simply stayed away. The 1980s brought a wave of corporate greed and hostile takeovers to Wall Street, an era defined by junk bonds and corporate raiders. Warren Buffett emerged during this time as a different kind of figure, the white knight. He didn't want to tear companies apart, he wanted to protect the ones he admired. His role in the 1985 merger between Capital Cities and ABC was a masterpiece of this strategy. He provided the capital and the reputation that allowed his friend Tom Murphy to acquire a much larger company, acting as a shield against the sharks of the era. By the middle of the decade, Berkshire Hathaway had been transformed from a failing textile mill into a massive multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. Each investment, from vacuum cleaners to encyclopedias, was a stroke on a canvas that was now becoming visible to the entire world. As his wealth surged into the billions, Warren's fame began to rival his fortune. He was no longer just an investor in Omaha. He was becoming a folk hero, the sage of the Midwest who lived in a house he bought in the 50s and drank 5 cherry Cokes a day. I watched as the annual meetings grew from small gatherings in a cafeteria to massive events that drew investors from across the globe. Despite the public adulation, he remained steadfast in his personal philosophy, particularly regarding his children. He made it clear that while they would be comfortable, they would not be heirs to a dynastic fortune. He believed that giving children too much money was a form of food stamps for the rich, and he wanted them to find their own way in the world. By the late 80s, Warren Buffett had reached a peak of confidence and influence, having navigated the storms of his personal life and the excesses of Wall Street to prove that integrity and a long-term vision were the most valuable assets of all. The resilience of rationality and the legacy of the sage. By the mid-80s, I watched as Berkshire Hathaway moved into a new and more public era, driven by the massive engine of its insurance operations. Warren Buffett had always viewed the world through the lens of probability, whether he was looking at a baseball score or the likelihood of a hurricane. This mathematical discipline became his greatest shield when the stock market began to quiver and eventually collapse in 1987. While the rest of the world watched the flickering screens in a state of sheer terror, Warren remained remarkably still. For him, the crash was not a tragedy, but a long-awaited confirmation that the market was not the perfect, efficient machine that professors at Harvard and Chicago claimed it to be. I found it fascinating to see him challenge the academic priesthood, those who believed that his success was merely the result of a lucky run in a national coin-flipping contest. He countered their complex formulas with a simple truth. If you know what a business is worth, you don't need to care what the market says today. This period marked his most significant departure from the early lessons of Benjamin Graham. Warren stopped hunting for the cheap, discarded cigar butts of the corporate world and turned his attention to the great icons of American commerce. The most spectacular example was his billion-dollar bet on Coca-Cola. I saw him become a true evangelist for the brand, studying global consumption patterns and realizing that Coke was essentially a bond with a coupon that would grow forever. He wasn't just buying a stock, he was buying a piece of the world's thirst. This move pushed his personal fortune into the billions, making him, for a time, the richest man in America. Yet, it did not change the way he lived or the way he thought. In the years that followed, Warren returned to his Omaha sanctuary, but his influence had become global. He continued to add to his shopping cart, buying into companies like General Dynamics and Wells Fargo when they were out of favor, always betting on the long-term resilience of the American economy. He became the great explainer, teaching a whole generation that the stock market is not a casino, but a place to own real, tangible businesses. As he reached his mid-60s, his legacy was already secure. It wasn't just the tens of billions of dollars he had accumulated. It was the fact that he had done it without leaving a trail of victims behind him. He had turned the cold logic of capitalism into a lifelong pursuit of wisdom and loyalty. His story remains a powerful reminder that even in a world of instant gratification and short-term thinking, there is a place for a man who builds for forever, a man who knows that his greatest investment is the one he never has to sell. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button so that more people can know about it. Thank you for your support. Wishing you a pleasant evening and happiness with your family. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.